have at least one timeline entry organizer ready to go with some information that you want to put on the timeline. And remember, this is the kind of thing that we're going to be building, right? This interactive timeline where we're able to flip through going forward into time in different events that took place in history and what happened at that time, right? So let's look a little bit closer at how we're going to add that information onto the timeline. I've got some slides here about creating graphic timelines. And we're going to use a piece of JavaScript called Timeline.js. I've given you the link to it in here, and so some of you, maybe if you're working in a history class or something, you might actually want to try using this in a different class. It's an open source piece of software. That means anybody can use it, and it will make that timeline for you from a Google spreadsheet. So I have set up for our class a Google spreadsheet, okay? All of you have access to it. You're going to be able to cut and paste your image from your timeline entry organizer into the spreadsheet, and the software will take care of the rest, okay? Which makes it really handy. So again, we're going to be creating this style of spreadsheet or timeline, and this is what the spreadsheet looks like, okay? The reason why I had you make the entry organizers like this, the spreadsheet looks a little complicated when you first open it up, but if we look a little closer at the different columns that are on the spreadsheet, each of those columns relate to a specific spot on the spreadsheet, and I'll show you that in a moment. Now, there are a couple of rules as we start working with this spreadsheet for the timeline. And remember, all of us are accessing the same spreadsheet, so it's important that we all kind of play by the same rules. Rule number 1 of Spreadsheet Club, no empty rows, okay? Each, as we'll discover, each row on the timeline, going from left to right, each row represents your entry onto the timeline, okay? It doesn't matter where you put your information on the spreadsheet. The JavaScript will take care of sorting it. But we don't want to leave any empty rows. Sometimes if we leave an empty row, the whole spreadsheet will kind of stop working, okay? It really, as you can imagine, as a timeline, it relies on a date. It needs to know the date of when something happened. And if it comes across a row that has no date, it kind of stops working at that point, okay? So the different columns on the spreadsheet represent these different things on the timeline. So for instance, the date that actually gets displayed, you know, relates to the very first column on the spreadsheet. The next column on there is the headline. So this little text for the headline goes on that column for the spreadsheet and the text. Thumbnail is a little picture that actually goes down into that interactive part of the timeline. And for many of you, the thumbnail image will probably just be the same thing that you have for the media up here. We can have a background, a media caption, and credit, okay? So if we look a little closer at that spreadsheet, as I said, the very first column, column A, is a spot for you to put the year of when something happened, and we have to have a year. You might know the actual month, day, and even the time of when something occurred, but chances are most of you are just putting in a year of when something happened. You might know the end of a year, so maybe it's somebody's life and how long they lived, okay? But for many of you, again, you will just have the year of when something happened, maybe when something was released or when some event occurred in history. Okay? Moving on, then we have the headline and the text. So that little headline text that you created over here, right? The headline is what happened here. Okay, that was going to get copied and pasted into the headline. The text that you put together on the entry organizer, you're going to copy and paste right into here. Okay, around 3 or 5 sentences. We can come back maybe to in another quick lesson tomorrow and look at how you can make links in there, an actual HTML link. So you may want to take one of your links to more information that you gathered, and we can actually put that in as a hyperlink coming up. Important though, we don't just want a headline and text, we want some media in there, so we can cut and paste in a link to a photo. So I've got a media link here, photo here. And we should give credit as to where we found the photo. Chances are you won't know the photographer that took the picture for your media, but maybe you can just tell us what website you got it from. Okay? And put a caption for your photo. Tell us what's happening in the photo. Okay? Finally, then the background. So I asked all of you to find an animated GIF in your planner, and you're going to be able to cut and paste that background link in there. If you decided not to use an animated GIF, and I encourage you to because I think it's fun to have them in there, you could opt for a solid color in the background. In that case, you'd have to pick up what's called a hex color. Hex color is what they use when they create websites with HTML code. All colors online on a website have a certain number value, and you can use this little link if you wanted to find say a blue or a red background or something. Okay? After you add something into the spreadsheet for the timeline, you need to update your web browser, refresh your page. Okay? Let me show you how this is going to work then, kind of in reality, and then we'll get a demo from one of your classmates too. So on the class website, tomorrow you're going to see a link in there that looks like this for our Period 5 class. And at the top of here, it mentions that here is the spreadsheet where you're going to add your information. Okay? And down there as well, we'll see the timeline already as it exists. So right now, there's not much information in there at all. Okay? I put a few historical dates in there just to kind of get it going so we can see it's working, but we don't have much info in there. Incidentally, if you want to see a bigger version of the timeline, you can open up a kind of a direct link to it, a bigger version of it here. Okay? All right, so let's open up that spreadsheet and see what it looks like. Here it is right now so far, not much on it. I can see that the very top row has that headline and the little text that we had for the kind of introduction, okay, to the timeline. That's what I had right here at the start. Okay, timeline 2023. Let me add an entry onto the timeline here, and I'm going to use this timeline, the little sample organizer that I showed you before. This is when the first Canon camera, Rebel camera, came out. And that came out in 2003. So I'm going to scroll down to the next available row on the timeline here. And I'm going to put in 2003. That's when it happened. Now, it happened that this camera that was introduced, one of the first digital SLRs in history, that happened to be in September. So I can put in 09 for September. You need to have numbered dates in here, numbered dates. There is no end date to this item, so I can skip over that. Display date means what date is actually going to show up on the timeline for us, okay? And in most instances, you're probably just going to put the same date of when it occurred, just 2003, okay? That's the display is what's actually going to show up. Well, what actually happened on that date? I already came out with a little headline there. It's the world's first affordable digital SLR camera. And I can just paste that right in here. Same with the little column or the paragraph of text that I've already prepared. I'm going to take that and paste it in here as well. Okay. That looks good. And let's move across then on the spreadsheet. You'll notice here too that I added in the name of the person who created the entry. I just put their first name in here. In this case, the example was Sinead. Make sure that you add your name to your timeline entry. Otherwise, I won't know exactly who created it. Okay, so that's really important for your marks. It's hard for me to know on the timeline just by a glance of who created an entry. All right, we're almost done here. We just need the media and the credit. So I already found a photo here that I thought might work well, so I'll copy and I can paste in that URL to the photo. That photo comes from a website called SLR Lounge, so I'll give them credit for putting that photo up, SLR Lounge. And so that was the wrong column there, SLR Lounge. And I should put a little caption in there. What are we looking at in this photo? Where we're looking at a photo of the Canon Rebel camera. Media thumbnail, that's the little photo that appears down on the bottom of the timeline. I can just copy and paste the same photo I used for the media. Okay, that'll work just fine. In another lesson, we could talk about the type of entry. That's not important. For the group, okay, you should enter into there the text for your group, the title of your group. So if it's like history of animation or history of photography, you want to put that in here, okay? That way the timeline will kind of work in those layers. All of your group's entries will appear in the same layer, okay? And finally then, the background. So I'm going to have an animated GIF, okay? I'm going to pop in the background there. So there's a link to a GIF that I think should work in there. Okay, so I've put all that stuff in the spreadsheet. I'm going to go and open up this link right here that takes me directly to the timeline in a new pop-up kind of window, a little bit bigger, and let's see what shows up in here. Okay, so we've got the main kind of timeline entry here for the beginning of it. I flip through, there's a few history items. Okay, and if I look a little bit closer down here, oh, that's the cloud gaming. Okay, I think I actually put this entry into my period 1 page maybe here. Hold on, have a look. Yeah, so it should show up in here. And there it is, the world's first affordable digital single lens reflex camera, so our Canon camera. I can see the headline that I put there, the text is here. This text might be a little bit long, we could edit it down slightly, but that's okay. All right? We've got the media that I put in there, the little credit of where it came from, the quick caption of what it is, and in the background I can see a little animated GIF of a digital SLR camera in there. Okay? So again, finding an empty row in the spreadsheet, adding in the information in, and then do a refresh in the browser window. I do recommend that you open up the spreadsheet, the Google spreadsheet here, use a different browser than Google Chrome, okay? Accessing the spreadsheet is a little easier. If you have Microsoft Edge available to you, or maybe you're on a Mac, use Safari, okay? It will make it faster for you to copy and paste the info from your little timeline organizer over here into the spreadsheet. Some of you might have, if you come up with an error about accessing the spreadsheet at all, again, just copy the URL, this one right here, so I could just right copy that link address, and pop over to a browser like Safari and paste it in there, and I can open it up and do any of those edits and changes. Okay, so that's basically how you're going to make one of those timeline entries.